Hello, and thank you for tuning in. On behalf of all of us at Books and Books, I welcome you to a virtual event with Emily Henry and Evie Dunmore for the release of People We Meet on Vacation. Emily Henry is the New York Times bestselling author of Beach Read and People We Meet on Vacation. She writes stories about love and family for both teens and adults. She studied creative writing at Hope College and the New York Center for Art and Media Studies, and now spends most of her time in Cincinnati, Ohio, and the part of Kentucky just beneath it. Evie Dunmore wrote her USA Today best-selling series inspired by the magical scenery of Oxford and her passion for romance, women pioneers, and all things Victorian. In her civilian life, she is a consultant with a Master of Science in Diplomacy from Oxford. Evie lives in Berlin and pours her fascination with 19th century Britain into her writing. Throughout tonight's broadcast, you're invited to ask questions by using the Ask a Question feature at the bottom of the screen, and you can order copies of People We Meet on Vacation, and we have signed book plates, or any of Emily or Evie's books by pressing the green button below. We appreciate each and every order and the generous donations from viewers everywhere. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Emily and Evie to the screen.
Hello. Thank you, Caroline. Hi.
Right. I think we just, start, Emily, with. Are you frozen again? Oh no.
I hope not.
Okay. No, you're there. You're there.
Can you hear me or no?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Great. Worst case scenario, if this stays choppy, I'm going to try moving toward my modem and just sitting in a really awkward place in my house. If we have to do that to make it work, I'll do that.
All right. Well, there's a slight delay in your speech at the moment, but I think let's work with it for as long as we can. I love the display you have behind you, the people we meet on vacation. It's such a wonderful sunny cover. You sent it to me, or your editor sent it to me the other day, and I opened it. I was like, it's so bright and so sunny. It makes me think of oranges and of cocktails and of just going abroad to the sun. It was so good. And congratulations on another wonderful book. I already loved Beach Read last year, and I can't believe you've done it again for this year. And I hope everyone picks it up and falls in love with it. And I'm really happy to be talking to you today about this book. And I was wondering, how do you even do it? Like, as I said, you've written a bestseller last year. This one is also going to be a bestseller for sure. And you're also reading, more advanced readers' copies from other authors than any other author that I know of. So how do you even do it? Are you in need of a vacation by any chance?
I am definitely in need of a vacation, but I think most of us are at this point. I don't know if that has to do with my workload so much as just I'm worried I'm frozen. I think I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna relocate. So I'm not okay. All right. Well, we'll see if it just give me a signal because you keep freezing for me.
Emily, your picture is just a little fuzzy. We can hear you, but
there's Emily is going to do the whole relocation thing.
Yeah.
But I've seen some questions pop up in the chat. Some of them were addressed to me. I don't know if Books and Books is up for it. I could answer some of the questions that are in the chat while Emily's relocating to come back on.
You should do that, Evie.
Would that be all right?
I don't know if you can hear me, but I think that's a good idea.
All right.
Can you hear us, Evie?
It looks like I can't really go into the chat where you're asking the questions. At least I'm not seeing them.
She seems to be frozen.
But I know someone asked me about my series that I've written, The League of Extraordinary Women. I think one of the readers checking in asked which one of the four ladies in the suffrage squad is my favorite. And the answer to that would be, I don't think I can pick a favorite here. I love them all the same way, like it would be like asking what is your favorite child, and it's quite impossible to answer that. So each one of them has something going for them that I really like or relate to. unfortunately, I can't see any more questions. Oh, it looks
So,
like we're back with something.
yeah.
That's great.
So sorry to pop out from the back end. I just want to
Start.
make sure you're both comfortable, and I can see you, Emily, which is great.
Am
We
I
can
clearer
see
now?
you.
Sorry
You're
for
much more clear. I
readers
just want to
for the
make
delay.
sure that everyone
I'm
can
sure we're
hear.
working very hard behind the scenes to make this work again.
She can't seem to hear us. Evie,
Yeah.
can you hear us? Okay. I am going to close out her video and prompt her back in, okay?
Cool. I think that's a good idea. And I'm going to
Let's
turn
do
on
that.
the light.
Yeah,
Everyone-
you look much better.
This is my yoga mat.
Everyone, just bear with us. We're going to get this to work.
We're closer than ever.
Let's see.
Hello again.
There you go. Okay, can you hear us? Can you hear both of us?
I can
Can
hear
you
you. Emily, would you like to say something?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Perfectly, yes. Great, we're
Okay,
back on.
cool. We're back on. Okay, so you were saying that you couldn't choose a favorite from your series.
Oh
was
yeah,
that-
I wasn't even sure if people heard it. I was just talking. So I apparently went through.
I could hear it. I don't know if everyone else could, but so was that specific to heroines or to leads or to just like romances? You couldn't choose a favorite period?
No. Before we went live, a reader had already sent a question into the chat for this, and it was asking whether I have a favorite in the League of Extraordinary Women and the one of the four girls.
One of the women.
One I prefer. So I was just trying to explain that it's very difficult for me to pick a favorite there. Trying, to bridge the time. I mean, could you pick a favorite from your characters, or?
I don't think so. It probably always is the people that I'm working with currently. I don't know. Is that how you feel? Because it's like you get so immersed in their world. They're the ones you know best.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
And I know we need to kind of back up, but real quick, I want to ask, when does Portrait of a Scotsman come out?
It comes out on September 7th.
September 7th. Okay, so everybody be aware, make sure that's pre-ordered. And now we can kind of like back up and start over.
Right. You were just about to tell us where you'd like to go on vacation, if you could, next.
I would so happily go anywhere. I would go anywhere at this point. I think my first trip probably will be to visit family out west in California and Oregon. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm fully vaccinated at this point, so it's only a matter of time. But I'm really eager to do more international travel. And, it's kind of like, I feel like we're kind of waiting to see how things shake out. And what about you?
Are you going to the Edinburgh event next year in May?
Yeah, you are too, right?
Yeah, me too. And it's definitely one of the trips I look forward to the most because I love Scotland. I love Edinburgh. It's definitely one of my favorite cities in the world. So it would be amazing to meet up in person. That would be so cool. And to meet readers, it's a huge event. Readers can come and chat with us and get books signed and everything. So that would be one of the trips I'm at the moment most looking forward to,
I'm really excited for that one too. And I also want to tell everyone so that they understand the big sacrifice you're making to be here tonight. And we've got all the technology figured out. It's 1:00 in the morning where Evie is. So she is here to party with us on her Friday night. So thank you so much for doing this. I'm such a huge fan of yours. So it meant so much. I mean, it means so much that you like my books. That means the world to me. And I was just so excited that we got to do it.
Oh, well, I love your books, which is also why I'm here at 1 a.m. in the morning very happily. So it's my pleasure. Thank you. Well, I'd like to stay on the topic of vacation a little bit because you notice I'm thinking about it a lot, the vacation this time. And I was wondering, in people we meet on vacation, Poppy organizes this holiday. It's this 1 week where it's crunch time. This is the make or break of her and Alex, and everything goes wrong with the not just between them, but the hotel is just a disaster. They arrive, they realize there's only one bed. I don't want to be spoilery here, but the air conditioning is broken down. Amelia, are you frozen again? She looks a bit frozen.
She is frozen again.
Okay.
So let's try. I'm going to try closing out her video and bringing her back on again, Evie. Sorry.
No worries at all. This is technology for you.
It is indeed. It's not perfect. That's for sure. Okay. Can you access the questions now? Because maybe you can take some of those.
Yeah.
while we
So
get her back
I'm
on.
looking at the questions. They seem to all be directed at Emily, so I'm afraid I can't answer them. Could each of you recommend a great book or two that you've read during COVID? Pam asks. Sure. I mean, it's been such a long year that I don't even recall all of the books I've read, but I can definitely recommend People We Meet on Vacation. That was great. I also really enjoyed Dead Girls. It's like more of a mystery. I wouldn't call it a thriller, but it's definitely a murder mystery that's coming out soon. It's a debut and it's fantastic. It's about a young woman in 1920s Harlem who is roped in by police to solve a bunch of murders in her neighborhood, and then things aren't as they seem. I thought it was really interesting and different from the usual genre that I read, because I tend to read a lot of romance and historical fiction. I also loved The Most Beautiful Girl in Cuba by Chanel Clayton, which is a historical fiction novel with a really strong romance subplot that I enjoyed. And every time I have to think on my feet about all the books I've read, it's difficult but those three I could definitely recommend for now. Something's moving here on the screen. Is somebody coming back? No. Emily, are you out there? There's more questions coming in now. Evie, can you tell us about your next book? Christina Russell asks. Yes, I'd love to. So my next book is called Portrait of a Scotsman. And after I finished the book, I thought, you know what, this is like a Hades and Persephone retelling. And it's weird that I didn't really think of it as I was writing, because there's actually Hades and Persephone in it, in terms of paintings and in terms of the way the heroine is thinking. And it really is a retelling of that loosely, but it was so much fun. It's about a young suffragist activist at Oxford University in the 1880s. Oh, I think we have someone back.
Hello.
Hi, Emily.
Oh my gosh. You go on with your answer.
No. Maybe just quickly, like one sentence to not have it hanging. And so her name is Hetty Greenfield, and maybe if you've read the other books, you might remember that she likes to just go off on her own and seek little adventures. And then the book kind of starts when she's taken one little adventure a bit too far, and she falls into the clutches of a guy named Lucian Blackstone, and he's a very grumpy Scot. And things end in a wedding that she never planned on, and neither did he. And then I call it a marriage of inconvenience, because really they both don't really know what to do. And then they go to Scotland together, and things really take off from there. And I really love Hetty's story, so I hope if you pick it up that you love it too.
It's so fantastic. Having read it, I do believe that it's your best yet, and I think that's like a really hard thing to do. Like, you have topped yourself every time.
Thank you.
And yeah, I mean, I've already told you all this, but it has this like Beauty and the Beast vibe, but it goes deeper than that, obviously, and explores all of the power dynamics there. And it's just so smart and so sexy and just so Evie Dunmore. It's fantastic.
Well, smart and sexy are good keywords to come back to your book, because I felt exactly the same about People We Meet on Vacation. I was thinking, like, it is so witty. There's so much profoundness wrapped in a witty package there that I couldn't stop reading once I finally had shoveled, my schedule free. And the way you just deliver these complex emotions and thoughts that I sometimes have myself, and I'm like assuming that surely nobody else is thinking along these lines. And then you write this book and I'm like, oh, other people are thinking along these lines. And this is so great about literature, that you kind of find yourself connected across an ocean, or with, people that are living completely different lives, just because you bring in these, universal emotions, but you make it so witty and fun that it's just like flying through the pages. So that was amazing. And I think what I was actually trying to ask you before you disappeared was if you've ever had a vacation as terrible as the one Poppy booked. She wanted it to be very sexy and cool, but it just didn't. You know, they had the broken air conditioner, they had one bed and one like weird deck chair that he had to sleep on, and the pool got drained, and the guy running the hotel was just being a jerk to her. So have you ever had a vacation that went along these lines at all? Oh no, she's gone again.
Okay, we're just going to wait a little bit because it seems to be her internet here. It might come back on. So let's just go with it.
I wonder, would it be worth,
Emily, it's just
would it be
coming
worth,
in and out. But see, now we can hear and see you. So
yeah, I don't really know. I mean, I'm like right next to my Wi-Fi at this point. No one else is connected to the internet. I don't know what's going on. I can try getting on my phone's hotspot. I'm not sure if that'll be better or worse.
Well, right now you're there.
And we'll see if it's worked. Right now I'm here. Okay, so while I'm here, I guess I'll start answering your question. So I'm not seeing my phone's Wi-Fi either. I think my computers, they're just out to get me. So a lot of the vacations came pretty much exactly from, I mean, as far as destinations and things that I did, activities, came from trips that I've taken. And then some of the like funnier, like worse moments also did come from trips that I've taken. So one of the things, you know, I guess I'll just, I'll sort of back up because I'm not sure who all has already read the book and who hasn't, because we sort of had that released like a month ago with Book of the Month. But basically, in case you don't already know, you probably do, the premise of the book is these two best friends, Alex and Poppy, have been taking a summer trip together every year since college. But 2 years ago, they had this falling out. You don't really know what happened, but they haven't really spoken for 2 years. So at the start of the book, Poppy is just really unhappy with her life, even though things are going how she wanted them to. And she decides what she needs to do is have this last trip to fix things in her friendship with Alex. And so she talks him into going to Palm Springs for a week. And like Evie was saying, like everything that can go wrong does go wrong in this scenario where she feels like she really needs it to go right and needs it to be fun and like, yeah, cool. And just like, I really nailed this. I'm such a good friend. And instead it's just like all awful. And so there are a lot of like little details that came from real trips and from real life. There's like a faulty air conditioner that's based on the air conditioner in my home, which does this really weird thing where in the dead of summer, when it's like 98 degrees outside, it overpowers the air conditioner. So inside it will like start rising. And if you try and turn it down more than 1 degree at a time, it just gets hotter. And that's a real thing that my air conditioner does. So like we will have to put it down 1 degree and wait for it to like drop 1 degree. And then we'll put it down another degree and sometimes it'll creep back up and we're just like, what's happening? So that was based on real life. I remember also going to Quebec at one point and like we were just staying in kind of like a sleepy town in the mountains. Didn't really have like a ton to do. We're just like, we're going to hike around and it'll be beautiful weather, whatever. And we got to the resort and there was this pool that was like, they hadn't drained it. They had just like left it for years, it looked like, and it was covered in pond scum. And we thought it was pretty funny. But then like the next day we were sitting outside, we saw this family like had just checked in. They had their 2 little kids and they all come running up wearing their bathing suits, like wearing the floaties. They run up to this chain link fence around the swimming pool and like put their hands through it and then look and just see like pond scum and like a newspaper floating in it. And I think the thing is that I realized when I set out to read this book that I knew was going to be told over the course of these vacations, I realized by looking at my own trips, like the trips you remember the best are either the ones that go like miraculously right, like things that you didn't plan just kind of fall together. You meet someone really interesting or you stumble into like a pub that you hadn't read about and it's just the perfect place or whatever. And then also the trips where things just go horribly wrong, but you're with the right people. So it's really funny. And before we got on this, I think this is kind of the segue before we came out of the green room, Evie was like, is it okay if I ask you about if you've taken like trips with exes or like love interests or whatever? And so I told her I would tell you my funniest trip with an ex story. And it was when I was a senior in high school. I had a boyfriend who was just kind of not an awful person, but an awful boyfriend because he was a teenage boy, and they're all awful at being boyfriends, at least. So my family was going to the beach for Thanksgiving, and I was like, my boyfriend doesn't really have like a tight-knit family. Would it be okay if he came on this trip for Thanksgiving? And so he went on this trip with us, but then the week before it, we had kind of not really been like talking very much. And I was like, something's going on with this guy. Like, I think maybe he is about to break up with me for someone else. And we went on the trip anyway. And on Thanksgiving Day, we had like 2 days left of the trip probably. He broke up with me in a hot tub. And it was like, just now it's like the funniest thing that's ever happened to me. But obviously at the time I was just like, now we go back to the resort we're staying at, and you go back to the room you're sharing with my brothers because we're like, teenagers. We're not allowed to share the same room, whatever. And we just have 2 days left with my family for Thanksgiving weekend. And at the time, obviously, nothing worse had ever happened to anyone. But now it's like such a treasured memory. It's just something, like, I'm glad that happened to me. That's like so like ridiculously over the top.
It is so over the top. Did you ever have a reckoning, as in 10 years later, you meet him, ask him, what, if at all, were you thinking when you did that? Or
you know what? The horrible thing about it is I like could have that reckoning because the last time I saw him actually, so I, went away to college. I don't know really what he did. And then like moved back after college to the same city that we both lived in, and would see him just like occasionally, but not like enough that we like talked ever. But then like didn't see him for years and years. And like probably like within 6 months before going into COVID, I saw him at a concert, and like he just kind of walked up and was like talking to me, and I was like, oh, I didn't know, like I thought you like moved away or something. And he was like, yeah, I did. I was like living in Colorado or wherever. And I was like, cool, well, welcome back. And then he was like, well, I've been back for like 5 years or something. And I was like, welcome back.
It's just not meant to be with that one. No,
it's not meant to be. It was, yeah. There have been actually several funny moments with that particular person. Like once my husband and I, when we weren't married yet, we were just dating, we ended up seeing him at like a party or something, and he was like wasted, and we had to give him, we didn't have to. We were like, we'll give you a ride home. And he was just like hiccuping in the back seat. It was just like, oh, what could have been? What could have been? This could have been my life.
Well, you had your happy end, so that's great. That's fantastic. And I was wondering, on the point of what, if at all, was he thinking doing that? Sometimes people panic in certain situations, or you put them into a situation like holiday, which is kind of serious maybe, and then it brings to the surface some feelings that you maybe repressed before, and then you start doing strange things in that context, or things that seem strange but make perfect sense if you've already had weird thoughts before. But it kind of links to the story, to Poppy and Alex. I don't think I spoil anything when we know they have a happy end, because it's a romance also, right? So
yeah.
But the book spans 10 years, right? So you have a really interesting format, I thought, in that it alternates between the past and the present. Sometimes this really takes me out of a novel, but not in this one. For some reason, you made all the flashbacks so tied into the present chapters that it just felt really like a seamless flow. Like I never once got taken out emotionally, which was great. And I was just wondering, if I were a reader and I came up to you and said, so they're doing this for 10 years and like dancing around each other for 10 years. Is that even, do people actually do that? Is that even realistic to do such a thing, to just not get to the point for 10 whole years? How did you come up with the 10 years? Why not 2? Or how would you explain their well, maybe not about them in case you don't want to spoil anything, but what would make people do something like that, characters?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think that's kind of like the hardest selling point and something that I really wanted to dig into. I think the thing for me, so one thing that I've been thinking about with this book in talking about it now, because a lot of times, I don't know if you relate to this, but I feel like a lot of times I don't really know what I'm writing about until like it comes out. And then I'm thinking about it, you know, a year and a half later, thinking, oh, that's kind of what I was thinking about.
The theme emerges, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, like I know the plot while I'm writing it. I'm like aware of what I'm writing. But yeah, you know, I knew I wanted to do this like When Harry Met Sally homage, which is like, you know, the classic friends to lovers trope. And I have never really like been in a relationship with someone that started as a friend. And I have been thinking about that and realized that a lot of the reason why is I value my friendships so much, that anytime I've had a friendship and there's been that moment where you're like, oh, wait, like, you know, we're both straight and you're a man and I'm a woman. Like we could try dating, whatever. Anytime that thought would even occur to me, it was just like, so easy to be like, I don't want to risk this thing. And so I was really excited to write about this dynamic where these two people, like they do seem in so many ways, like, why wouldn't you just go for this? Like you love each other so much. But I really wanted to make it clear that the stakes are so high for both of them, because this is sort of like their person in a way that they will never get back if they try dating and it doesn't work out. And, you know, Poppy and Alex have very different backstories, very different home lives, but they both sort of felt like outsiders in a way, or like she felt, I guess, more like an outsider. And he felt like he was sort of had a caregiver role in his family. And so meeting this person who was so different from him brought out this side of him that he didn't really know he'd been subduing and repressing. And I really wanted it to feel like they're this lifeline for each other, but at the same time, they're so different. And there's so much to lose. And then there's a lot of reasons to think that it wouldn't work out. Alex is a teacher back in their hometown that Poppy never liked living in. Poppy's a travel writer in New York. And, you know, she's on the road a lot of the time. And he kind of thinks that he's too boring for her. And she kind of thinks that she's too all over the place for him or too irresponsible for him. So I'm not really sure. Like, I'm not sure. Does it happen in real life? I don't know. I think it does. You know what? Actually, I think it does, because I just remembered my, now it's like, seems like old news. So it's kind of left my mind, but my college roommate had this best friend from childhood. I remember like they were still best friends all from childhood through college. And then after college, they started dating and now they're married and they have 2 kids. But she told me one of her memories when she was probably 12 years old and he was like a year or 2 older than her. She said something like, her parents were driving them home from something and they were in the back seat. And she was like, you should know, I'm not looking for a relationship with you or something like that. And they were like 12 years old or whatever. And he was like, okay. And like, you know, he's very like straight laced and like kind of traditional. And, you know, it was just sort of a traditional guy. And she was sort of this very ambitious woman who, like, I don't know, was a little bit wilder than him. And so I think it does happen when the stakes are that high, but it's just the fact of getting the reader to believe these 2 people belong together while hopefully making them understand why it's like not just an easy decision for Poppy to try this thing, why she would have to feel like she knows for a fact how it's going to end up, because otherwise the price is the relationship that means the most to her out of all of her relationships.
Well, I totally bought it, and that's why I wanted to talk about it, because I didn't expect me to be emotionally so understanding of it, but somehow you managed to make the emotional stakes for each one of them feel so high that I could actually get on board with it. Also because I felt like you created the characters in such a way that it made sense for them to be this way. You know, had they both been a little bit more like Alex, I don't think it would have necessarily worked. And had they both been a little bit more like had Alex been a bit more like Poppy, I again don't think you would have gotten this dynamic. So you just perfectly played them off each other with this overthinking, strategic, planning personality that upped the stakes for him.
Yeah.
And for her, who sometimes for me, she didn't even feel like she knew what she was feeling, or maybe she did, but she couldn't place it or didn't want to place it. So it was such a good match of characters, and that made me wonder whether you just how do you say, intuitively create the characters, or have you ever read any any works on how to, like, on relationship dynamics or certain types of characters that create certain dynamics between them? Like, how do you go about researching?
Yeah, I'm going to answer this, but then I also want you to answer, because I have the exact same question for you, because I feel like historical romance, the tropes of that are so well defined, but you're really good at taking it deeper than just like, we know that this character and this character often will end up in, it feels like real people. So I definitely want to hear your answer after mine. And I'm sure people want to. So I in some ways I'm weirdly type A, or I want to be more type A and organized. And so when I first got really serious about writing, I was constantly trying to sort of map my characters onto archetypes and reading all these craft books about, like, how these different archetypes would interact, or how they'll challenge each other or whatever. And every time I would try to build my characters that way, they would just feel like caricatures, and I couldn't really figure out how to fix it, how to make them feel real. And then it kind of just shifted to me kind of focusing on plot. And as I would write a book, I would just not really know who the characters were when I started. And as I wrote through the plot, I would get to the end and kind of figure out what that character's like big realization was, basically, like how they were changing. And at that point, then I would know who they actually needed to start out as for that to like be the transformation that they needed. And so then in my later drafts, I'll usually kind of change the character then to match who I know they are by the end. With Alex and Poppy, I've never had characters that were as clear to me from the very beginning as they were. And I do wonder if it's just because I have a lot of close friends who are kind of that dynamic with their partners, where one of them is like kind of, loud and zany and likes a lot of attention and is all over the place and, just kind of unpredictable. And the other one is sort of the one who just kind of nudges them back onto the path so they don't like walk into traffic. So it's definitely like a dynamic that I see a lot. But I also think when I'm trying to go deep for that emotional arc, I'm always thinking about childhood, because I don't know if you feel this way or not, but me, like, so much of our deciding or defining characteristics are decided in childhood in this weird way. We are like, whether it's trauma or just your family dynamics or whatever, it's weird when you're an adult and you realize how much an effect your childhood still has on you. And so I think, I knew who these characters were, but in trying to go deeper with them, I was thinking like, what was their family life like? And how, like, what makes a person become very cautious about their decisions and about their relationships, and what makes a person kind of be restless and always wanting to travel and kind of like making new friends all the time. And so a lot of it really, I think it's kind of funny because I only read my good reviews. So feel free to write my bad reviews and you won't be hurting me. I don't read them. But I was reading someone's review saying that they were really surprised that so much of Poppy's kind of emotional arc and backstory was based on things that happened in like her childhood. And they expected to find that really kind of like annoying and like grow up. But by the end, they were like really on board and understood this. This was sort of the first thing that set off this pattern for this character of how she interacts with the world. And that's just kind of the way I know how to do it. So like, I always am just sort of thinking about like what kind of wounded them as kids, and like how was that sort of reinforced throughout their adolescence and adulthood. But I really want the answer for you too, because yeah, like I said, all of the relationships in your books have just this very juicy, lush, complex feeling where it's like you clearly know these characters, you know them inside and out. And so we're able to too, and it's just the best.
Thank you. I think from what you've just explained that our processes are quite similar.
Cool.
So far, I've just been lucky, I think, because as you said, you felt Poppy and Alex very clearly. And I think it's been the same with my 3 books so far, that I've just felt the protagonists very, very clearly, and they just came to me like that. So of course, you do some developing and some fleshing out, some deep dives later on, but I always felt them quite well already. And I do it similar to what you do, as in, so I'm a plotter, so I do need a structure. I need to know where I want to go in order to write that chapter. If I have no idea what it's good for, then it's difficult for me to write that chapter. And of course, the turning points that are related to the emotional development of the characters is something that I need to think about, like, with a clear head. But everything that happens in between, and how the characters express their wounds. For example, you mentioned before, a wound, like something that happened in childhood, can make a person cautious or restless. But cautiousness and restlessness can be expressed in different ways depending on the rest of your character, right? I mean, we're not just one thing ever. We're always some intersection of different things. So caution for some character might be to just go all in, but to never go deep, and for others to just be super standoffish right away. And I think that's something that I solve by thinking about what type of archetype is that. For example, with the couple in Scotsman, it was very clear to me that Hattie was a bouncy type B sunshine person. And it was very clear to me that Lucien was a type A not bouncy person. Yeah. So coming from there, I could develop what you mentioned, the wound and how they react to stuff. But really, so far, just lucky. I've always kind of felt them like they were my friends. So it was.
That's the dream. I mean, there's just nothing I feel like that can compare to that feeling when their voices are just in your head, because the writing process is so much easier when you know how they would react in almost any situation. And it's just a different thing when you're like, I don't know who you are yet. So I'm just like making you make decisions, and later I might have to undo all of it.
Definitely. The going is not as smoothly with book 4 for that reason. Not all the characters involved are as, inside my head as it was before. But it's also a good learning experience. So
yeah.
So I'm looking at the time here. I think we've had some portion for discussing the books, and then there's some time set aside for answering questions from viewers. And I don't know if Books and Books wants to give us a sign that it's time to switch to the question part, because we've done 40 minutes on.
You can go ahead and switch to the question part.
So Emily,
if you want your sign.
Okay. So Emily, if you want to switch to question mode, or do you have anything to add? What you really want readers to know about people who meet on vacation that you still want to add at this point?
I mean, I think mostly I just want to thank everyone for being so receptive. And I would imagine it's felt similar to you, where Bringing Down the Duke was this huge, to me at least, it seemed like this huge phenomenon. And it was sort of like, how is she going to top this? And then I feel like I feel really lucky to be writing in the romance space, because I feel like readers they remain open to what we're going to do that's going to be different from the last book. And I really, really appreciate feeling that like people aren't expecting this to be beach read. And I've seen that hugely already in the early response. And that's just so nice. I mean, you can't really ask for a better readership. So I guess I would say it's not beach read, but I feel like people have been just so open-hearted as readers.
Oh no, she's
and I'm gonna keep trying to write books they like. That's all. And oh no.
No,
okay,
you're back.
Right?
You're back on. It was just a little scare. So yeah.
Let's do some questions.
Right. So you've already told us a little bit. So Nicole asked, how did you research all the destinations and people we meet on vacation? She loved the travel aspect. I did love the travel aspect too. You already told us a little bit about actually taking bits and pieces from your real vacations. Yeah. Did you then also look at online destinations online to research the other ones, or?
Yeah, I basically made the decisions of where the vacations would be set based on places I had been fairly recently or enough to be familiar with, and places I knew I had scheduled upcoming. So basically I had taken every trip except for the Croatia and Tuscany trips, but I knew I was going to both of those places within the editing timeline. So I could kind of write the bare bones and then fill in the details based on like, you know, my experience in those places. And then the other thing was I actually haven't been to Palm Springs since I was a kid. And so I was really counting on like, I fully thought that during the editing process, because this was, you know, before COVID that I wrote it, I thought I'm like, I'll go out there and I'll be able to see what it's like in the summer and kind of, you know, compare to what I've read online. And then that didn't happen. And I was editing the book in a global pandemic. But I did do a ton of weirdly specific research for that because I was so paranoid about getting it wrong. And so like there's one thing that is not really a spoiler, but like there's like a botanical gardens in Palm Springs that closes at like, I don't remember exactly what time, but it closes in the early afternoon because it just gets so hot there that they don't want people out, you know, walking around in the heat. And so there were a lot of things like that. There's like a ferry or a merry-go-round or something that closes because the metal gets too hot. So there were details like that that I was really grateful are like accessible in this day and age online, because I really wanted, you know, the reason I kind of chose to do it as vacations instead of setting the book firmly in any of these places was that I only knew them as a traveler and I didn't want to like have to pretend to be a local and then feel like I was getting it wrong. So yeah, basically all the trips I have taken except for the Palm Springs trip, which will happen someday.
Well, great. And I have another question here from Neve Walsh, and she asks if you have any favorite romance tropes.
Ooh, okay, yes, and I want your answers too. So I think my favorite like overall romance trope probably is enemies to lovers. I'm not actually a huge friends to lovers person, but this book I just knew that this is what the characters, like the scenario that they'd be in, and it was a great time to write it. But I think friends or enemies to lovers is just always so potent. It's always so exciting when it's done well. But I also think I'm really, really picky about it. I feel like there are lines that I'm like, that's just disrespectful, and I could never like come back from that. And then there's also times where I'm like, you're not enemies, you're just flirting. Like you can just call it flirting and not say you're enemies to lovers. And then I also do love, which is in this in a capacity, I do love the one bed like mini trope. I love two people, one bed is just always a funny scenario to put people in.
Especially if they're enemies.
Yes, right. What are your favorite tropes?
I think again, pretty much matching your answer. My favorite trope has to be enemies to lovers, because as you say, like if it's done well, it just has a very sparkly chemistry that, at least for me, is very sparkly. so I love reading it, and so far I think all three of my books have been a variation of enemies to lovers. So I think for me, it would be a real challenge to write friends to lovers, because like you, that's not necessarily the trope I'd pick up first in line.
Yeah.
However, when anything is written well, that's usually what I say. Like when I love the voice, or the story is told in a particularly wonderful way, you can tell me any trope. And
Same.
I loved your book, and it was completely like, well, it wasn't entirely friends to lovers, because it's not like they both started out thinking the other person is, oh, I feel very brotherly or very sisterly towards him. And, you know, so they did have what I think would be necessary to convince me there was something there, and they, at least for one of them, and they shoved it a bit to the back of their minds for reasons. So that made it work for me. So yeah, if done well, I love to read any trope, but enemies to lovers is just, it has like a high success factor with me, I noticed.
Yeah, I think you're so right. There's a sparkliness to it because there's just instantly tension, and that can boil over into romantic tension so visibly and palpably. And also it just provides such a great opportunity for like fun dialogue when two people like openly dislike each other. And it is funny and fun to think about the fact that, your first three books are all different variations on enemies to lovers. And it's really fun. I actually love marriage of convenience and historical. And I think that's partly why Portrait of a Scotsman was like my favorite, is because it's like both of those braided together, or inconvenience, like you said.
Yeah. And you just mentioned the banter, or the dialogues are fun, and there's another question here that links into that. So Amanda would like to know, she says, one thing that stood out when I read Beach Read and People We Meet on Vacation is how funny the banter is between characters. How do you come up with such hilarious dialogue? Is one of it inspired by real conversations you have?
First of all, thank you. Some of it is, but also it's just like a really funny experience to be in, because I think, you know, like sometimes you just meet someone where you just have that chemistry and conversations just feel like, I always think of like a tennis match where it's just like, you're just constantly setting each other up for success, and you kind of know that that's what you're doing. It's like a game you're playing. And I love when I meet someone where it's like, that's like instantly just a thing that we're good at together. But it's really weird writing it because I'm just doing that for myself. My dog just woke up and remembered I'm in the room. So yeah, it's funny. It happens pretty naturally for me because I think it is just like, it feels like I'm just setting myself up for joke after joke. And yeah, I don't know. It's like the kind of thing where I've tried to figure out how to like sort of bottle this and teach it when people ask. But I think the big thing is sort of just you always want a conversation to have tension or like a push and pull feeling, or like a batting it back and forth kind of feeling is what I think about. So it's like, if somebody says something, you don't want them to just reply to that something. You want them to take that even further. Like if it's a joke, you want them to either take it even further or kind of like shoot it down in some interesting way. I don't really think of conversations as like this person says something and this person says something. It's like, I don't know. I just think of it as having movement, and I feel like that's really helpful.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, at least as a writer, totally. I think we have time for one last question. Is that right?
I think so, or at least, I mean,
I think
we have
so
a couple. Okay, cool. Let's do two.
Okay, let's do two. Wonderful. So Veronica asks, if you had to pair up Alex or Poppy with one of Evie's characters, who would you choose?
Oh my gosh, that is such a fun. Okay, so I think that I would pair Poppy with Lucian, which is unfair to you all who haven't read it yet, but that's the freshest in my mind. Although I'm trying to think, like Tristan. I think the funniest pairing and the one that makes the most sense, because Hattie is so, like you said, she's like this sunshine, this like bubbly whatever. I think it's really easy to imagine inserting Poppy into her place, because it's just like exactly the thing that's like kind of designed to, you know, push Lucian's buttons, but also like make him soften and open up. But that might just be because it's the freshest in my mind. I think January could probably hold her own with the Duke of Montgomery. I think she would push back the way that he needs. He needs a firm hand.
He does need a firm hand. I would concur. Like, I think that Hattie and Poppy are similar types, and therefore would match Lucian best. I think if you put Poppy and Tristan together,
Chaos.
Chaos, absolute chaos. And,
I think they'd get arrested. I mean, they'd both be in jail. Like, I think they'd be great friends who should not spend any like serious amount of time together.
I agree. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, fun. No, I would have made the same choice. And then we have time for one final question, I think. There's two that are here that I'd like to answer both, really. So let's try to be really quick about it. How about that? So Christina Russell asks, Emily, do you think you'd ever write a historical romance? Evie, would you ever write a contemporary romance? I can say that, yes, I'd absolutely be open to writing contemporary. I haven't made any concrete plans yet, but I can see myself do that. How about you, Emily?
I missed the question as I was briefly frozen. Is it whether I'd write historical?
Yes.
Okay, I wish desperately that I could, but I just reading your latest book, especially thinking about all of the research that has to go into this, is like, I cannot believe that you're keeping up that book a year pace, because like this is just months of research. Although I guess you already have that fascination and probably have a lot of the baseline knowledge. I think if I ever wrote a historical romance, it would be so anachronistic that it would just be like completely ridiculous. So maybe someday I'll just like put out for free like my idea of like just made up Regency rules, like no basis in history, because I do love all of the I love reading it so much. I love the tension that it offers by having all these very strict rules, but I don't actually know the rules by heart, so I'm not equipped at this time.
Sounds like you'd be a good candidate for writing historical fantasy then.
Yeah, then I can just take what I do know, but then I just won't add any fantasy elements.
Steampunk or something.
Fantasy.
Yeah, awesome. And the last question was like, could you tell Sunshine what inspired you to start writing, or what theme seems to be showing up that you weave through when you look back at your books?
Yeah, I think so. I think what inspired me to start writing was really just loving reading so much. And as a kid, you know, I was reading a couple of series, and so that were like releasing at the time. And so, you know, I would get caught up on the series, and I would just feel like I'm not ready to be done with this world. And so writing was always just an extension of reading for me. It was just like, I want more of this. And I do want your answer for sure after this. And then like I realized, oh, this can be a job. And that was like life-changing, because I think at that point I still thought you basically had to be like an astronaut or a teacher, like the jobs that you think of as a kid. And yeah, so I think I didn't write for most of my childhood, but it was like I did when I was a kid who had just kind of gotten really into reading. And then I started again in college, seriously, like a little bit in high school and then seriously in college. And it was just being like, it's weird. It's like, what makes us even love reading? I don't totally understand it. It's just like getting so swept up in something that it just holds your entire focus and you can't do anything else for hours. And when writing's at its best, it's like, that's the feeling I'm chasing, is that feeling of like, my back hurts because I just realized I've needed to pee for 5 hours, but I was like so immersed.
Yeah.
And then theme wise, I think I am always like using my writing to tackle kind of my fears. And I think that's why there's like often sort of a death element in even my rom-coms, because I think I'm usually using my fiction as like a safe way to think about just like acceptance of life in general, and when things are hard. And so it's like, you know, writer's block was like a thing I was thinking about. And with this, it was sort of like millennial ennui or depression, just feeling like things are so good and I still have this like feeling, this emptiness sometimes. Like, what do I do with that? And so I think a lot of it is sort of my like, it's sort of like a meditation for me in a way.
Your dog says that's right.
Yeah, she just coughed, like packed up phlegm. But Evie, what are your answers? How did you get into writing?
I've always written something. Like you, I loved reading when I was a child. I already started writing as a child. I just told stories to myself on paper. I think I was extremely hyper focused on reading. I mean, it was extreme. I think how much I read, and you know, and I guess as you said, it seemed like a natural extension to be writing words too, because apparently that was the way I was trying to make sense of the world or of my feelings or whatever. Yeah. So there was always writing in my life, but that I actually sat down and wrote a book with a beginning, a middle, and an end. That didn't happen until Annabelle and Sebastian literally not literally, figuratively popped into my head and started having conversations, and the pressure to put them onto paper and to explore whatever relationship they were having became very strong. And I think when I was 8 years old, they asked us at school, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I put down onto my little sheet, I want to be a writer. So I guess when they came to me, Annabelle and Sebastian, I thought back and I thought, there's so many dreams that we never pursue. Why not give it one shot and try it? And turned out it was good.
It really worked.
I keep doing it for as long as I can now.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And that's really funny because I also have somewhere, I think when I was 8 years old, they had us write our autobiography, which is so silly to even call it that. But there was a page that was like, when I grow up, I will. And I wrote that I would either, my dog is just like having an allergy attack. Sorry, everyone. But I wrote that I would either play in the WNBA, play basketball, which I had literally never played basketball and still have not played basketball. But I thought that it seemed like cool and feminist, I think, or be a writer. And then I still never played basketball. So it left me with that one choice. But yeah, I think it's so interesting, you know, hearing my dog's now, she doesn't know this is happening. So she's bringing me a toy.
Oh, that's nice of her.
Yeah, but yeah, I think it's so interesting, like that fixation where you're just sort of like, I don't know if we'll ever be readers in the way that we are when we're kids, where it's just like, I could read all night. And I'm sure you relate to that, just like being like getting out your flashlight and just being like, I'm not going to bed, I'll be tired at school.
I read at school under my desk and got in trouble for it. It was just, it must have, I don't know what it was. Maybe troubled upbringing and I needed to escape into something, if you want to look at it negatively. Yeah.
Or maybe you just always knew that your heart was in stories and you were going to be a writer.
Exactly. So I think we've kind of thoroughly answered that last question. So if you have anything to add, will we hand back over to Books and Books?
Hello, Books and Books.
Oh, there they are.
Well, thank you guys so much. That turned out to be a fantastic event. Thank you so much to our audience for your patience. Yeah. And thank you to Christina behind the scenes. She is such a pro. She has such a slow pulse. We couldn't have done it without her. So Emily, Evie, thanks again. And if you guys haven't ordered your copy of People We Meet on Vacation, you can do so by clicking the green button below. And if you haven't read any of Emily or Evie's other books, please do that. They're fantastic. And keep an eye out for Portrait of a Scotsman come September. Thanks again, guys, and have a great night.
Thank you for having us. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you,
Good luck. Yeah, I hope you get some rest during your next string of events.
I will.
Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.